I am the CEO of the Northwest Gas Association and really grateful to be a part of this great team and be able to share some of our work with all of you. Just a little bit of detail on the format of today. We'll spend about 40 minutes walking through some of the findings and research that comes from the Outlook. And then we'll have some time for some Q&A. We recognize that you may have questions that come up as the presentation rolls on. So please feel free to use the chat to type your questions into the chat, and we will tackle those as we come to the end of the presentation. And if you'll give me just a minute to share my screen here, I think. Hopefully you all are able to see that. We'll go ahead and get things started. As I mentioned, we're going to keep the microphones muted. If you have questions, you can feel free to stick them in the chat box. We are recording this and it will be available on our YouTube channel, which is listed below. So if you have colleagues who wanted to see this but were unable to attend, they can certainly watch it again on our YouTube channel, and we welcome that. So feel free to share with those within your organization. So why are we here today? Well, as we're all well aware, the Pacific Northwest energy system is in a pivotal moment of transition where we have rising demand, we have changing supply portfolios, and there's a convergence of policy, physics, and prices that highlights the interdependence between the gas and electric system, which have for a long time been treated separately. With this electricity demand rising faster than expected, peak winter reliability needs becoming more difficult to serve, natural gas does remain a backbone of the region's energy system. And it's really not a question of whether we need natural gas. It's a question of how we can keep these systems together while we're transforming it. The Northwest Gas Association is a binational trade organization in the Pacific Northwest. Our members include 6 natural gas utilities and the 3 natural gas transmission pipelines that transport natural gas from production areas in Canada and from the US Rockies throughout the Pacific Northwest. We also have several infrastructure development, natural gas suppliers, and service providers as members of our organization. And our job is to advocate for the role of the region's gas infrastructure in safely delivering a cleaner, more dependable, and affordable energy future. Just to put it into context, so you understand who we represent, there's 3.7 million households that are heated with natural gas, which covers about approximately 10 million people directly served by this natural gas system. And over 350,000 businesses across the region are also reliant upon the resource that our members provide. In total, over 50% of the regional's non-transportation energy is delivered by natural gas. And the Outlook is our biennial update of the state of the natural gas system. It includes both historical and actual integrated resource planning data that's sourced from our utilities and our transmission pipelines. It highlights both the annual average demand and coincidental peak demand, as well as the supply utilization and policy trends impacting our region. And the region covers British Columbia, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. If for some reason you aren't able to stick around for the entirety of this presentation, we want you to make sure that you take away a few things. And there's 5 things that we think everyone should know about what's happening in our energy transition. As I mentioned earlier, electricity demand is accelerating, and that peak loads, not our annual averages, are what drive infrastructure investments. Direct use of natural gas serves more than half of the region's energy demand, and these electric and gas systems are inseparable. We're also very well aware of the challenges it takes to build infrastructure, and that no matter what kind of infrastructure you're trying to build, it takes years to get that accomplished. So let's really get into the meat of the Outlook. And the first thing we should focus on is natural gas is energy that people actually use. It isn't just a commodity, it's economic and personal infrastructure. Our economy runs on natural gas. I don't know about you, but my home is heated with natural gas, as is my water. And that's the same for, as I mentioned, 3.7 million households across the region. But it's also used as an economic engine in our food and agriculture industries, heavy industries such as fertilizer, steel, glass, cement, pulp and paper. And increasingly, we're hearing conversations about large loads. And when we say large loads today, it typically means data centers. However, large loads have been around for a long time. Our advanced manufacturing sector here in the region is significant, as well as as a source for power generation to serve electric loads. And natural gas has been changing. The usage has been changing over the last half a century. If we look at this chart on the right-hand side, it's showing 1999's load composition versus 2025's. And this is as a percentage of annual demand. And we can see that there has been 30% growth over this time frame, but the makeup of that growth has shifted. Residential and commercial as a percentage of annual demand have stayed relatively flat, which is a great story in terms of energy efficiency. It means that as we've been bringing on residential and commercial customers, the use per customer has been holding relatively steady. But there has been a pretty significant shift between industrial and generation. We are seeing generation become the predominant source or predominant use of natural gas as our grid has been changing. And we've seen some attrition in the industrial space. And when we look at our load forecasts as compiled in the outlook, we are seeing that demand for natural gas is it's steady, but it is policy constrained. So the impacts of some of the policies that have been passed that seek to reduce the use of natural gas are trickling through to the demand forecasts that our members have provided. In our expected case, which is that medium line on the chart, you can see that we're projecting an average annual increase of about 1.3% and cumulative growth of about 12.2% over the 10-year window. We also look at a low case and a high case, and you can see in the low case, it's very moderate growth of about 0.5%. And in the high case, we're looking at approximately 2.2% of growth. And that's really, again, driven by cost of carbon, LNG exports, and various policies that are pushing more electrification. You will see a bump in the early years of the forecast in 2027 and 2028. That is driven by Woodfibre LNG export facility coming online in British Columbia. We think it's important to look at how these forecasts have changed over time. As I said, the outlook is done every 2 years. And this bar chart represents the change, the sectoral change between outlooks. The yellow bars are the outlook from 2022. The blue bars are the outlook from 2024, and the green is our most recent outlook. And if you look in total, you'll see that growth has remained relatively flat, pretty tepid. In 2022, it was very, very marginal at about 0.2%. And now the last two outlooks has really hovered around 1.2 to 1.3%. But again, when we dig into the different sectors, we're seeing a significant shift. We've seen a decline in the growth of our residential and our commercial space. Industrial is growing, and that again is led by the Woodfibre project that comes online in 2027. And where we're seeing the biggest change is in our power generation, where in 2022 we were forecasting negative growth in power generation. And currently we're showing growth of about 0.2% in generation. What we also know to be true, as I mentioned earlier, is that it isn't just the average load that we need to be looking at, that where reliability happens is on peak, and that peak day is really important. we've all heard and been talking about the January 2024 cold snap. And this chart on this slide shows once again that on that peak hour, the coldest hour of the coldest day in that cold snap, natural gas served 70% of the energy and electricity provided 30% of the energy. And of that electricity, 30%, about 5% of that was gas used to generate the electricity to serve that. Again, gas is an integral part of our energy system and is delivering more energy than our electricity counterpart on these cold weather events. And when we look at our outlook, our peak day forecast from the outlook, we're also seeing that the peak is getting peakier. This bar chart or this line chart here shows again the forecast comparisons over several outlooks to show how it has been changing over time. The dark green line represents the current outlook's peak day forecast in the first few years of our forecast horizon. The yellow line is 2022, the blue line is 2024, and the dark green line is 2019. And you can see the shift as policy has changed, moving that peak line from its high point of 2019, where we saw more growth in the gas system, to where it's currently at, starting lower. But what we're seeing with the 2026 forecast is that there is a hockey stick effect in these early years. Part of that is driven again by wood fiber, as we've talked about, but it's also the increase in the need for natural gas as a fuel for electricity. Over time, again, if we run this peak day line out for 2026, you will see it start to flatten, but we are seeing this growth in the immediate term. And so that should give us pause and room for thought around how do we serve these loads moving forward. In the outlook, when we put together those peak day forecasts along with the resources to supply that, we are seeing a tightening of that supply and demand balance. We've seen this over the last few years and have been raising that concern, but we're seeing it materialize even more with recent forecasts. The top chart shows the peak day demand, so that line that we just looked at in the previous slide, compared to the current capacity of our pipeline infrastructure. So the light blue line is that total pipeline capacity, and the dark blue line is that peak day demand. Again, you see that growing demand in the front few years of the forecast and that tapering off as the forecast develops. But what you will see in the bar chart below, it's highlighting that peak day deficiency. So for the first few years of our forecast, we do have some capacity available. But as we move beyond those first few years, that capacity tightens and we actually fall short. There is a shortfall in 3 of the 10 years of our forecast horizon, and we're very, very close to negative in the remaining years. It's important to remember that building out this infrastructure, as we talked about earlier, it takes years, at least 5 years currently, to get those projects permitted. So we do have an immediate issue that we need to work together as a region to solve. Let's talk a little bit about market fundamentals, looking at the supply and the prices, where we get our natural gas from. We are blessed in the Northwest. If we look at this map to the right, you can see the dark gray areas are the supply basins that serve our region, the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin and the U.S. Rockies on that lower right-hand corner of the screen. And again, you can see the infrastructure there that serves us with the lines, the pipelines that get it there. Because we are blessed to be between 2 prolific basins, we have some diversity of supply, and those that need it can pick and choose which basins they can access, which gives us a resiliency and also gives us some pricing diversity. And we are lucky that in the United States, the survey that's done every year on the amount of reserves available to us, our current reserves have over 100 years of supply based on current consumption rates. And north of the border in Canada, their marketable resource base is approximately 300 years of supply. So we have ample supply regionally to meet the demands of the region. And because we have supply, great access to that supply, the commodity prices have plummeted. We have for a long time with the advent of hydraulic fracturing, and again, continuing to be able to assess the reserves that we have and be able to recover those reserves. We have hundreds of years of supply for consumers, which has driven price down. There is, of course, volatility in markets, and certainly with the pipeline constraints that we have, we may see prices during peak times diverge and be higher. But over the long run, what we're seeing is that we are continuing to see projected lower prices through, for sure, this time horizon, which goes through 2040. And that, from a customer standpoint, translates to value. This chart on the right highlights the weighted average delivered cost of energy. So this cost is for Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. And again, this is the delivered. So it's an all-in cost to customers, which includes the generation, transmission, distribution, and equipment costs. The blue line on the bottom is for natural gas, residential, and then the dotted line is commercial, compared to the green line of residential electricity and the dotted line for commercial electricity. And you can see that the delivered cost of electricity is about 2 times the cost of gas. And so not only are we providing a significant amount of energy, we're providing a significant amount of value for that energy that customers are paying for. And capacity is critical. As was shown on the map, we are sandwiched between 2 prolific supply basins, but you need pipelines to get that supply out and to market. And if you noticed on that map, there aren't a ton of lines that move supply to our region. And so we're very reliant upon that infrastructure. 2 major pipelines are serving the region. And when we look at the winter months when our demands are heaviest, what we're seeing is that on average, the utilization of these pipelines exceeds 90% during the winter months for the last 5 years. And when we look into our forecast, when you add in the Woodfibre LNG facility, we really start to push up against that 100% capacity line. And there are times throughout the winter where we are actually running over 100% currently. So there is very little flexibility, particularly in the winter months, in order to absorb any unplanned outages or any demand surges that occur in the region. And that doesn't mean that there hasn't been infrastructure projects that are underway or have been completed. On this table here, you'll see several projects that our member companies have on the books or have recently completed that are there to help meet that need that we currently have. But as you saw in our chart, there is a shortage with our current forecasts, and that these projects alone, which are reflected there, won't meet the needs. You're also, I'm sure, well aware of the study that E3 has put out, which looks at the resource adequacy in the Pacific Northwest, and they've identified the 9 gigawatt shortage on the electric side and the potential challenges that that brings for the region, and again, the heavy reliance that we'll have on our current fleet of natural gas generators to serve that electric load. So it's really, really important that we think about how we're able to serve all of these different loads with our existing infrastructure, given that the timeline for getting new projects in the queue and under construction takes a lead time of about 5 years. It's something that we need to be thinking a lot about as we move forward. which leads us right into this discussion around the gas and electric interdependence and how we are really partners together in solving this energy equation. And as we've all talked about for the last few years, that January 2024 cold snap really did stimulate a lot of great conversation between the two. We know that those disruptions that occurred on the gas side created challenges for our electric counterparts as well. And that realization on the reliance between the two systems became more apparent than it ever had before. I think those of us that have worked in the space for a long time have always known they're interdependent, but really became fully appreciative of that when we had disruption on, again, those two on those systems that serve us in the region. We looked at the peak hour and we talked about the 70% of the demand that was served by the direct use of natural gas in the region. And again, the 5% that was needed to serve electric loads. But if we look over those 4 cold days in 2024, it isn't just an hourly problem or an hourly issue where natural gas is serving a significant portion of the load. In cold weather, on most days, natural gas is serving a significant portion of the energy demand. And so it's important to think about that again as we look at how we solve this energy challenge going forward, recognizing the importance. It's not just about single hours, it's also about these cold days and having that reliability over successive cold days on both sides of the equation. And that means working closely with our electric partners. As an outcropping of that 2024 cold snap, there was a desire to bring the two fuels together. And so the Northwest Gas Association, along with the Pacific Northwest Utility Committee Conference, PNUCC, we have come together to work on figuring out how we can be better aligned and better coordinated in planning for these types of events. And so we look heavily and rely heavily upon the work of PNUC. This is a snapshot from their recent regional forecast. And as we've all been grappling with these demands that are growing faster than our planning can catch up to, but we are starting to come into alignment here. And what PNUC has shared is that their forecasts have been continuing to grow. They've raised their growth rates in their most recent forecast. And if you look at the chart to the right, you'll see that they're the different growth rates on both the summer peak and the winter peak. And that what we're seeing is actual demands are often ahead of where our forecasts are at. And so we've been playing a bit of catch up. And so working together, I think what we're trying to accomplish is better coordination, better visibility, and better alignment so that we can work together to build resources for what our region needs. And again, what's come out of that work is really this underappreciated dependency, which I think now is fully appreciated by those that have been looking at this, on natural gas as a fuel for generating electricity, especially as we see coal retirements and intermittent renewables become an increasingly larger portion of the electricity fleet. Natural gas remains that critical, firm, dispatchable resource. I think it's important to remember that gas-fired generation comprises approximately 23% of the region's generating capability. It is second in line behind our amazing hydropower system, and that we're expecting to continue to see growth in this space over time. And so it's really not, again, a question of gas versus electricity. It's about how we work these systems together to meet the energy needs of consumers in the region. So from that work, again, NWGA and PNUCC have been engaged in this coordination initiative, started back in May of 2024. At that time, it was really about the work streams on operational readiness, analytical alignment, awareness building, and regional convening. And all the work that was done between May of 2024 culminated in a symposium on October 25th, where we really brought together all the players in this energy space, from lawmakers and regulators to operators and utilities and consumers and advocacy groups to have a conversation about the resource adequacy challenge and how and what we can do together to optimize our system, achieve our ambitious climate goals, and make sure that consumers have affordable energy that they need today. So the stakes are high. We're continuing that work. The end of that work was not just a symposium to raise awareness. We have some work streams that have come out of that we are continuing to advance forward around coordinated planning, improving the sharing of data and the visibility of data, and aligning policy across states to every extent possible, as well as focusing on building infrastructure. We need to start building things now in order to meet the needs of today as well as the needs in the future. So to navigate this transition, we do need every tool in the tool chest. Our decarbonization policies are approaching deadlines. We certainly have significant policy goals, ambitious policy goals in Washington and Oregon and our neighbors to the north in British Columbia. We have to remember that these systems are deeply interdependent. Electricity is a significant consumer of natural gas currently. In Oregon, it is the largest consumer of natural gas, and in Washington, it's pretty close as well. And so it's important that when we look at these policy frameworks that are oftentimes set in silos, there is a lot of overlap and overlay. We also have to recognize that when you've seen one utility, you've seen one utility, and that the impacts of these policies are not uniform. The resources available to each utility is not uniform. And so we have to be careful and thoughtful as we march through this transition together, that we aren't creating unintended consequences between utilities or between jurisdictions, because this is really a regional problem with the regional connectivity of the infrastructure. All of these policies have impacts on regions outside of their own regions. And even within a state, you have different impacts with depending upon the utility that provides your service. Again, we need every tool. Diversity and choice are a regional strength. And I think one thing that we are blessed with is that we're starting from a great emissions starting point, in that our regional emissions as a natural gas sector, direct use particularly, are very low. If you look at this chart on the right, direct use that's used in homes and businesses currently in the Pacific Northwest makes up about 10% of the CO2 emissions, and the industrial gas use is about 6% compared to all other sources, which is 84%. And embedded in that 84% would be the use of natural gas for generation of electricity. And we really need to be thinking about this system over the long term, that there is not a silver bullet for achieving these emission reductions. It's going to take all of us moving in the same direction together, and that the industry is continuing to invest and look into ways that we can decarbonize through RNG, through hydrogen blending, optimizing the electric and gas system and infrastructure with hybrid and dual fuel heating, carbon capture, and certified natural gas. And as I mentioned, the work with PNUCC and many of our other industry partners, it's all about, we're not sitting on our heels waiting for things to happen to us. We're continuing to work in these different work streams. Particularly, we're focusing right now on the coordinated planning aspects, how we can plan the gas and electric systems together better, especially to meet this immediate near-term shortages that we have and risks that we have. We're also continuing to work to better the data visibility and information sharing between the two sectors. We have our winter readiness work group that gathers annually to prepare for the upcoming winter season, to make sure that we are planning and doing our best to communicate where the systems are at and what we think forecasts look like, and where we can work together when and if a reliability issue occurs. And again, infrastructure investment, we need to continue to work on permitting reforms that bring all types of energy resources to bear sooner, and working to align our policies again, because we are one region and the infrastructure serves regionally, to make sure that it's providing the framework that will reliably and affordably meet the needs of the region in this immediate term and in the long term while we work towards those ambitious climate goals. And where we think we're heading is to that reliable, affordable, lower carbon energy system in the Pacific Northwest. We believe that we can grow the economy, we can provide reliable electricity and natural gas, we can do it affordably, we can lower emissions, and we can have resilient infrastructure and consumer choice, but we have to be intentional about it. We have to look at the data objectively, and we have to acknowledge where we're at currently and what we can do in the immediate term. And so we're really excited to be a part of this conversation. We're excited that the Outlook can be a source of data for folks to lean into, to better understand how the natural gas system operates, what our loads look like, and how we can contribute to this broader energy transition conversation in a positive and meaningful way. So with that, I am going to stop talking and open up the floor to you all for any questions that you might have regarding any of the data that you've seen, or just any questions that may have come as we've walked through some of the highlights of the report. Again, the report is on our website. Reports on the website. We'll send it out to all of you that have attended this meeting, but we are certainly happy to answer any questions that you all may have. Feel free to throw them in the chat. Judy has put the link to the Outlook there. I'm not seeing any questions come in. I'll give folks a few more minutes. But I do want to take a minute to, well, folks, if there's any questions that are out there, to thank the staff at the Northwest Gas Association. I want to thank Judy, Jason Verduzco, our newest team member, our consultant, Scott Robertson, who handles all of our communications, and former CEO and current senior advisor to the Northwest Gas Association, Dan Kirshner. In particular, Dan's work on getting this Outlook pulled together. It's no easy task getting all this data together, putting it into a document that is as concise as possible when we're dealing with really complex energy issues. Is no easy task. And so I want to thank Dan especially for bringing that all together. I also want to give a big thank you to our member companies for their engagement, their staff's time, their data, and their eyes on this report. We can't do it without our members, and we're very grateful to all of them. Question. So one question that's come into the chat, let's see, is how are legislators, policymakers responding to the Outlook when that data is shared with them? I would say I think it's still mixed. We've seen this as well with the E3 study that has come out, is that I think studies are studies to folks. And, I think there is growing recognition and agreement that we certainly are facing a challenge. I think the sticky part is the solutioning to those challenges. I think that, there's, certain legislators who again continue to want to eliminate natural gas as an option. And there are other legislators who are a little more receptive to understanding the problem that exists currently. Again, keeping an eye out on the future. But I think what we have to continue to highlight is the importance of our current direct use of natural gas. It's a significant part of the energy equation. And, our belief and our continued belief is that we aren't going to see natural gas go away for a long, long time, at least not in any of the planning horizons that us or our member companies are looking at. And that what we should be focusing on is how we can, again, work together to reduce the impacts of emissions from our energy system while continuing to provide the reliable and affordable resource that is available. So we're going to continue to keep this data in front of people. We're going to continue to work with our electric partners on helping support their work and their challenges in meeting the increasingly growing demand on the electric side. So I think we're continuing to do that work, and we certainly welcome any partners in helping to educate and advocate on behalf of the natural gas system. Let's see. Another question is, some studies put a risk level on the potential for energy shortages. Have you thought about ranking the risk of shortages across the planning horizon? Yeah, Scott, that's a great question. That hasn't been a topic that has come up, but I do think that you raise an important point, and certainly the risk elevation of energy shortages is being looked at not just from us regionally, as you're all aware, NERC, WEC, other organizations have increased the risk profile. And so again, how we look at that at a different level, I think is important, and certainly something that we are thinking about, especially given the challenges that we have with capacity on our pipeline, is highlighting areas where we may have more risk than others. Let's see. As reliability and load growth concerns increase, do you see Oregon regulators taking a different view toward the role of natural gas generation in the resource mix? I think that probably goes to, comments that I've already made earlier. I think that I would say that I think there's more broad awareness on the importance and the role that natural gas is playing in the energy mix. And I don't know that the view is different. I think what we're wrestling against is how much natural gas as a generation resource states are willing to entertain. But I think what gets lost in that conversation when we start focusing solely on just natural gas for power generation is the direct use of natural gas. And again, the way that direct use of natural gas can serve as a capacity resource for the electric system as the way in which electricity is used changes over time. Hopefully that helped a little bit. Again, I think there's lots of work that we are, as an organization, continuing to do to raise awareness, to bring data to this conversation, particularly around natural gas's role in the energy mix. I think we are optimistic and hopeful that as we continue to have these conversations and continue to educate on behalf of the system, that we'll start to encourage what I'm going to call creative and innovative conversations around how we tackle this together. We are incredibly grateful for, as I said, our work with PNUC and being able to work with the electric side on on moving these conversations forward and being more collaborative than we maybe have in the past. I would say that we're making progress, and um, that's where we all should be celebrating, is trying to figure out how we can continue to make progress and celebrate that and recognize that. Any other questions? Well, we are always here and available. Certainly, feel free to reach out to us on the website, reach out to me directly. I'm always happy to have a conversation. Please also feel free to share the information from the Outlook with folks in your networks that you think would benefit from having this type of information. And feel free to connect us with any group or anybody that you want us to present to. We're always happy to share the story and be a part of a constructive conversation wherever we can. Again, I want to thank all of you for taking time today to be with us, for taking moment to take a look at the Outlook data, ask questions. And again, I just want to extend my gratitude to NWGA staff and our member companies for all their work in this space. Thanks for attending.